Since one of my most frequently asked questions is how I study, I thought the easiest would be to just show you the end result of preparing for one of my toughest exams. So for pharmacology this year, I chose to use this Atoma notebook that I got from my boyfriend in Luxembourg, but I'm told it's also sold in Belgium and France as well as Amazon. Two things that I like about this notebook is that it has very thick paper at 90 grams per meter squared, so the pen doesn't seep through, and that it's disc bound. At my university, exams are usually oral and they're usually based on topic lists that are released by the department. Here you've got the topic list for pharmacology, which is a grand total of 91 topics, usually each of them containing quite a lot of information. It's split into 3 separate lists, A, B, and C. When preparing for an exam so massive, it's really hard to get your head wrapped around it. So what I did was I made myself this nice little overview of what I wanted to do, which Anki decks I wanted to know by heart, which sketchy videos I had left to watch, so on and so forth. The night before the exam, I made myself this list of high yield material that I wanted to be sure that I covered, just in case. So I rarely make notes by hand anymore. I type almost everything because it's much faster for me, and I almost never finish a notebook. So this is a rare exception, and I'm very happy with the result, which is why I wanted to share it with you guys. Alright, well, let's get started. One of the toughest things in pharmacology for me personally was trying to understand the language of pharmacology and what exactly it was that I was expected to know. In the beginning, I was handwriting things from the textbook as well as class notes. It was very all over the place. I was taking notes, but I really didn't understand what any of it meant. Throughout my note-taking in this book, I used mainly these pens because I really like the way that they hold, and as I mentioned, the paper is thick enough that the pens don't bleed through. Mostly I use Stabilo highlighters in almost everything I do. I really like the pastel colors, and the pastel yellow is my absolute favorite one. The ones that I like the most are gel pens, including the Muji gel pens and the Uniball gel pens. These ones are thicker, so they're perfect for headings, which is what I use them for. The Uniball Air is also excellent. It writes really smoothly, but it's quite fragile, so I've wasted a few pens by dropping them before. The Mujis are my favorite for taking little notes and margins because they're so thin. As you can see, I use the black one to its entirety. This is another example of when I was taking class notes by hand. I would use one color pen for the headings or the drug names, and in the right side, in that blue column, I was kind of writing down exactly their side effects. I made most of my headings using these Stabilo pastel pens. So as we went on, I'm still taking notes by hand, but this is only the 3rd week of school, and I honestly have no idea what I'm doing. This page is an excellent example of notes that are pretty but that ended up being entirely useless. Later on, I never even looked at that list. It was just something I copied. By the end of the semester, I only had these 4 or 5 pages of blank left, which was really cool, knowing that I'd filled up an entire notebook. So this brings me to one of my favorite pages. This is an overview of topic list A for our semi-final. I specifically remember writing these out one day. It took hours, because what I'd done was finally be able to categorize all the drugs into the appropriate categories in my head, which was one of the biggest issues. Once I made this page, which honestly took a really long time, I was able to look back on this not only for the semi-final but the final as well. So this is an example of a page of notes that ended up being quite useful throughout. This disc-bound notebook was exactly what I needed for a class like Pharma. It's really cool because you can take it out, you can reorder the pages, which meant it didn't matter what order I did my topics in. I could just flip them around in the end. So, as I mentioned, it's really easy to replace pages and reorder pages in disc-bound notebooks such as this one, which made it perfect for Pharma because it didn't matter which topic notes I made first. So here's when I started to do my topic notes. Originally, I hadn't intended to handwrite everything for this exam because it takes such a long time. But it ended up being so helpful that by the end of the final preparation, I had handwritten almost all 91 topics except for the antimicrobials. As I flip through, you kind of see that my note-taking is very condensed. You've got a lot of highlighter colors, so after I took the initial notes in black and usually blue, I would go back and emphasize different things for myself. In general, I really wanted to summarize things and make connections, so for instance, I wrote out beta blockers in 2 ways. I wrote them out by the name and what they did and how long they lasted, and I also wrote it out as the short-lasting, the long-lasting, etc. I would put mnemonics into these little notes as well, sometimes as post-its. Later on, I could remove them. Anything you see highlighted in pink is usually a mnemonic. Anything in orange or green would be a heading, and the pastel yellow, which is my favorite color, would be things that I absolutely wanted to know. And in the end, I have these summary pages. Like I said, I tried to make connections, so I would write out a list of all of the fast-acting beta blockers or all of the time-dependent antibiotics so that I would have them categorized. If the teacher asks, oh, can you name another time-dependent antibiotic? I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, it's on that note page. And finally, I made a collection of all the little random drugs that kept popping up that I would continuously forget, so that on the day before the exam I'd be able to just look at it. Sometimes there were things that didn't fit into any other category or topic, so they would end up in the back of my notebook on these ugly little post-its. For instance, I wrote down all of the interstitial fibrosis causing drugs. So there you have it, my pharmacology notebook. I hope that was helpful to you, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.